Hey guys, RosW here. Are you looking for a healer that's capable of veteran and hard mode dungeons and is fun to play? Then this might be the build for you. And please, feel free to subscribe for more videos like this. So first things first, let's get into the stats. So, we have got 64 points into Magicka, 0 into health, 0 into stamina, and we are using the Atronach Mundus stone. Now, looking at our stats, we have 2k mag recovery, and we have 32k max mag, 22k health, and just under 14k max stam. Our resistances are sitting at just under 17k spell with 9k physical resistance, and we have just under 3300 weapon and spell damage. Onto the race, and we are Breton. The reason we have picked Breton is because they are the best for sustain in terms of Magicka. So the first passive, we get 1000 max Magicka, which is just nice. We get 130 Magicka recovery, which is just nice for that extra sustain boost, and we do get a bit of resistance from this. We also then get 7% reduction in cost from Magicka abilities, which is absolutely huge for this. As we're a healer, all of our skills are going to be mag based, so that is incredible. Let's talk about food and potions. So, for this build, we have a couple of options dependent on the situation. For the most part, we will be using Witch Mother's Potent Brew. This gives you some health, it gives you some max mag, and then it gives you Magicka recovery. And this is generally what you're going to be using most of the time. You get a bit extra survivability with the health, and you get that recovery bonus. The other option here is actually Ghastly Eyeball, but I would only recommend putting this on if you're really struggling for sustain. Maybe there's a lot of high heal checks that you need to be meeting, but that is another option, so feel free to use this in those situations. Moving on to the potions, there's a few options here. I'm going to go over the main two, and the first one is your generic trash pots. You can just get these off of enemies that you kill. These are good for mag recovery, and they're just a good option for if you just want to have cheap pots. The other option is spell power pots. These give you increased weapon and spell damage, and give you that recovery as well. And this is just huge because it's increasing the amount that your heals are doing, so that is why we can use these. And then the third option is obviously tri stats. In some situations, you might want to put these on. If you're just using them for the extra recovery and stuff, tri stats can be a good option here as they give you the heal, they give you some stand back. So these are definitely something that you can get. Now, let's move on to the gear. The one thing I will say with the gear is this is a dungeon build specifically. You can use this in trials. It is absolutely fine to run in vet trials. However, I will not be going over alternate sets for this other than one staff option, but just keep that in mind. But this is a dungeon build. It's good in all dungeons that I've tested it in, and it can do hard modes, it can do vets, it's fine for those. It can also do trifectas if you're skilled enough as a player. So yeah, let's get right into it. So first things first, on the front bar we are using the Master's Perfected Restoration Staff. We have this empowered to increase our healing done by 9%, and also a weapon damage glyph, so we get extra weapon damage and spell damage, which means that our heals are going to do more when they hit someone. Now, the Master's Perfected Restoration Staff is the initial heal of Grand Healing, which is an AoE heal from Resto Staff, which I will get onto when we get to the skills. It restores Magicka and Stamina every 2 seconds, so this is great for sustain. However, I will go over one other option that can be good in certain situations, for example, VSS healing if you're doing ice. And this is Black Rose Perfected Restoration Staff. Obviously, both of these staffs you can get in non-perfected and they will work just fine. But for this showcase, I have the perfected one, and we have this in infused with weapon damage enchant. And what this does is whenever you play Steadfast Ward, You apply major vitality to your target for 4 seconds, which means any healing that they're receiving and damage shield is going to be increased by 12%, which is absolutely huge if you need to do mega heals on someone. So that is a good thing to have in your toolkit if you have access to. Now, moving on to our back bar, we are using Powerful Assault. This can be picked up for Telvar. If not, you can pick this up from guild traders. However, they can be very expensive, so just keep that in mind. So if you need it, I would recommend just farming up Telvar instead. And we've got this in infused with a crusher enchant. You can use shock staff instead of ice staff if you want concussion. However, I'm using the ice staff. I personally prefer it for what it offers, so that's what I'm using. And this will be on your back bar. So powerful assault, whenever you cast an assault ability, your group members within 12 meters will gain 307 weapon and spell damage for 15 seconds, and this can hit up to 5 group members, 6 including yourself. So if you're in a trial, you can run 2 healers with this set. However, obviously the group will have to be positioned in a way that this will proc efficiently. So, for example, something like VHOF, you can actually use this on triplets if you're in 2 groups for that fight. So that is something to keep in mind. But in dungeons, you know, you're going to be with your DDs most of the time, and you'll be able to proc this on them, so it's a huge damage buff. And moving on, we are running Symphony of Blades. These are both in light and divines with max mag enchants. And Symphony of Blades is a monster set which, when you heal a group member who is under 50% of their primary resource, so say for example they're a stamina DD, if they're under 50% of their max stam, then they will gain resources every 1 second for 6 seconds, and this can occur once every 18 seconds. So this is a great sustain option. This will work on tanks, DDs, like anyone that it procs on, and it's just huge for sustain. And it also gives you one line which it gives you 4% healing done, which just increases your overall heals, and that is light on the head and shoulders, just to say again. Now onto your last set, and this is your generic healer set, which I'd recommend on most healers to have in general, and that is Spell Power Cure. This comes from White Gold Tower. You can farm this on normal if you can't do the vet, and we have 5 pieces on the body. They are all in light, all in max mag, and they are divines on all pieces. Now, this set, whenever you overheal yourself or an ally, you give them major courage for 5 seconds, increasing their weapon and spell damage by 430. This is huge, and it doesn't have a cooldown, so you can basically apply this like 100% uptime as long as you're healing people, which you're always going to be doing. So this is a huge set to have, and I would highly recommend picking this up if you don't have. So yeah. Then finally, we have Powerful Assault Jewelry. Yet again, you can pick this up from guild traders. It'll be a bit cheaper than the ice stuff, but it still may be a bit expensive. But you can also get this for Telvar, as I said. And we are running all infused with weapon and spell damage. Now, you can change out some of these for mag recovery if you do want a bit extra sustain. However, personally, I found this to be the best option because you just get really, really big heals, and we have sustain from some of our skills and stuff like that, so this is what I would recommend using personally. Alright, let's finally talk about the skills. So, first things first, I'm going to talk about subclassing. So, we are a Warden base, however, we have replaced 2 skill lines, and we have picked up Restoring Light from Templar, and we have picked up Siphoning from Nightblade, and we have retained Green Balance. So, these are the subclassing options that I have picked for this build. So let's get on to the skills. Now, there will be some skills which can be changed out depending on situations, and I will try and go over those as well, so just keep that in mind. So, on the front bar, we're starting with Radiating Regeneration. This is a Resto staff ability, and what it does is it fires out a beam to 3 nearby allies and puts a heal over time on them for 10 seconds, which will heal for 14,000. This can be higher or lower depending on your gear and stuff like that, so just keep that in mind. Moving on, we have Combat Prayer. This is a burst heal, and it also applies Minor Berserk and Minor Resolve, which increases you and your allies' damage done by 5%, and it gives them resistances for 10 seconds. Next skill, which is very important, is Energy Orb. This is from Undaunted, and this is a synergy skill, so you want to be using this on cooldown to give people resources, and it also heals over time. And the main point of the skill is your tanks, your DDs, anyone in the group can take the synergy and it will give them a burst heal for them and people around, and also restore magicka and stamina, magicka or stamina, sorry, depending on whichever is higher. So that is great for sustain. And then we have Healing Springs, aka Illustrious Healing, which will partner with your staff on your front bar, the Masters specifically. And what this does is it summons an AoE on the floor for 10 seconds, which does a heal over time, and it also increases the magical recovery by 15 for each target affected, stacking up to 20. And this is specific for yourself. So obviously, if you're in a trial and you've got all the DDs in that circle, you're going to get a huge boost in your own sustain. So that is really nice to have. Now, next we have Enchanted Growth. This is another thing that I do use for a burst heal sometimes because it can come out quicker than Combat Prayer. However, the main reason we're using this is because it gives minor endurance and minor intellect, which increases magicka and stamina recovery by 15% for 20 seconds, which is just nice. You can put it onto the DDs, and it also applies to any target that you heal. So this is just nice to have, and it lasts for 20 seconds, so it has good uptime. Finally, we're using Enchanted Forest. I'm just going to quickly say you can replace this for Barrier. However, I do like this as a heal option. Sometimes if I need to get a res, I can put this down really quickly, and it costs only 90 ultimate, so you can get this out really quick. But what this is an AoE, and you put it down and it does huge heals, and you generate 20 ultimate if the initial heal is used on a friendly target under 50% health, so you're actually getting back nearly 25% of the ability cost just from proccing it on someone under 50% health, and it's just really nice. It's a really big heal, really good for heal checks, stuff like that, so that is why we're using it on the front bar. Moving on to the back bar, I'm going to start off with the ultimate, which is Aggressive Warhorn, and this is basically what you're going to be using most of the time. It gives you and your group a damage buff, and what it does is it gives max resources by 10%, which is nice, and that's for 30 seconds. And it then gives you and your allies Major Force, increasing your critical damage by 20% for 10 seconds. So huge damage buff there, really nice to use. Next, we have Extended Ritual, and this is another Area of Effect heal from Templar line. And the main reason we're using this is for the synergy, which an ally can take, which will cleanse them of all harmful effects. And you can also use this on yourself to do the same thing, so that's why we're using that. Next, we have Blockade of Frost. This is from the Destro school line, and we're using this to proc our Crusher, as well as it applies Minor Breach and a Snare, and it also can do Brittle, which is just nice, so that's why we're using that. Next, we are using Echoing Vigor. This is to proc our Powerful Assault. This will cost Stam, but this is a AoE burst heal, and it procs our PA, so that's why we're using that. Next, we have Budding Seeds. This is another area heal, so we actually have two, which is really nice. And the thing with this is an ally can take the synergy, and it will give them a really big heal. And another thing with this is after its duration is up, it basically does a big burst heal at the end, which is nice for the tank or anyone that's inside. Finally, we have siphoning attacks, and this is mainly here for the passive sustain. However, you can use this to get back resources quick if you want to. Just remember this costs health. And while you have this slotted, you're basically it's going to heal you and it's going to give you resources. So it's just there mostly for that. Alright, let's go over a couple of other options for skills. Now, the first one is going to be Crush and Shock. This is a Destro skill, and we will be using this as a flex option in case you need to get interrupts. Now, there are certain fights in the game that you need to get interrupts quickly, and instead of having to run over and bash them, you can use this skill. All you have to do is highlight the target and cast it, and it will interrupt them. So this is a huge skill to have access to, so I would highly recommend getting this just as a flex option. So yeah. The next we have got Healing Ward. This is from the Resto skill line, and this is mainly so if you're using the Black Rose staff, you are able to proc it, and this will basically give a damage shield and heal under the shield. So that's huge, but the main reason is to proc the staff's bonus. So moving on, in Undaunted, we have Overflowing Altar. This is another skill which you can slot in certain situations, and it gives a heal over time for people in the area, and it's only a small heal, but the main reason is for that synergy. Now, what the synergy does is when an ally activates it, they heal for 65% of their max health, which means if someone's on really low health and they take this, this will practically put them back up to full health. So this is a huge skill to have access to, and really nice for certain fights where the tank might be getting very heavy damage and they can take this when they need it. Alright, let's go over some passives. So for Green Balance, we are taking all of the passives, and these just help out with healing. So I'm not going to go into too much detail, however, I will hover over them just so you can read them if you need to. But what these are doing, they're giving us sustain, they're giving us some extra healing, and they're just nice to have. And the main one as well here is this one, which whenever you heal yourself or an ally, you're giving them 10% max health. This is quite nice for the DDs because extra health means that they have extra survivability, so this is really nice. Moving on, we are taking all from Restoring Light. Yet again, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but most of these are just to increase healing and obviously, help with sustain and stuff like that. So yeah, I will hover over these so you can see. And this one is another one that's huge, so I will go over this one. And this reduces your resurrection time, and that means you can get people up a lot quicker. So if your DDs are dead, and you can get them up. And the one thing that is also huge about this is it revives people at max health. So when you come back after getting res, it means you'll be at full health. Like the people you're resing will be at 100% health rather than like 50, 60%. So that's really nice. Moving on, we go on to siphoning, and yet again, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but there's a couple of passives here that are nice, like Catalyst. You're getting ultimate for taking a potion, max resources, increase your healing, and then more ultimate. So yeah, we're mainly got this because you get ultimate regen, but we're mainly using it for siphoning attacks for the sustain. Now moving on, we are taking all of the Destro passives. I'm not going to go into too much detail here because some of them aren't really too relevant, but Ice Staff will block with mag rather than stam, which is nice because you're obviously a lot of your points are into mag, so you have a lot of mag to block with. So I'd recommend doing that. Extra pen, extra chance to do status effects, and then Ice Staff increases your block, so it means you can block more on your back bar. And then this gives you a bit of sustain, so that's also nice to have. Moving on, we also take all of the Resto Staff passives, and yet again, I won't go into too much detail. However, I will go over a couple. So the first thing to note is with Essence Strain passive, whenever you complete a charged heavy attack, aka a heavy attack, it increases your healing done by 16% for 4 seconds. So that is something to keep in mind. You can use heavy attacks to not only gain your resources, but also get that extra healing. Now, increasing your healing done by 15% on allies on low health. Yet again, restores more mag from heavy attacking, so make sure that you're heavy attacking to get resources back. Absorb, which restores magicka whenever you block an attack. And then increases your healing. So they're all pretty standard, but nice to have. Now, moving on, we have all of the light armor passives. This one I won't go over too much, but it's just giving us a lot of sustain, and that's the main reason we're using it, is for that sustain, and the extra crit is also nice. So yeah. Moving on, we don't take medium or heavy because we're not using it. And then Undaunted, we're taking both. So the first one is whenever we take a synergy, we get resources back, which is nice because we're going to have synergies in trials or dungeons from other people that we can take, and that's giving us extra sustain. And then we take this one for the extra 2% max resources, just for having different armor types. We're only using light, but you still get 2%, so it's worth taking. Moving on, we don't take any assault, and we don't take any support. And yet again, as I say, we are Breton, so we take all of these. Another thing to keep in mind is actually leveling your alchemy and stuff like that, but I have not got the skill points currently to put into this. However, there is some in here which increases the effects of potions, so just keep that in mind for that. Moving on to champion points. Now, I will go over the green one quickly. Yet again, this is the three that I usually recommend. So the first is Steed's Blessing, which just increases your movement speed out of combat, which means you can just get around a bit easier in dungeons in between ad pools. We then have Liquid Efficiency, which whenever you take a potion has a 10% chance not to consume it, which is just nice. And finally, Rational, which is basically increasing the duration of your buff food. Next, I'm going to go over the blue tree. So let's have a look at my slot balls. So we're using From the Brink, which applies a damage shield to people that are under 25% health when you heal them. This can be really, really handy, especially in heal checks, because if someone goes low health, it gives them that extra like damage shield, which can take damage for them while they heal up underneath it. This can come in really, really handy because it means the overall survivability and chances of that person not dying will increase so much with this skill. Next, we have Hope Infusion. This works similar, but it's at 50% or below, and this is giving minor heroism for 1 second for every 300 magicka recovery you have. So with this build, you're going to have around 5 seconds of this, and this can occur once every 10 seconds. The current duration, as you can see, is 6 seconds, so yeah, this will vary dependent on your recovery, but this is really, really nice, and it just gives people their ult quicker. Next, we have Soothing Tides, and this is increasing our healing done with area of effects by 2% per stage, so 10% in total. This is self-explanatory, just to increase healing for those abilities. Next, we have Swift Renewal, and this is increasing our healing done with heal over times by 2% per stage, and that's a total of 10% as well, so 10% flat increase to those. There is a couple others here which I would also recommend if you want, and the first one is this one, which is increasing your weapon and spell damage with your healing abilities, so just increased healing basically. And the next one is Focused Mend, which increases your single target heals. So if you know you're going to be using a lot of burst heals, this can also be handy. Moving on to the red tree, and this one is kind of dependent on preference. However, the main ones that I will be taking is Spirit March 3 because it will stack with the Templar passive, and it makes it so you can res people like insanely quick. So that's why I have this, especially for dungeons. You need to get your DDs up quick, you need to get your tank up quick, like it's just nice to have. Next, we have Rejuvenation for the extra recovery. We then take Fortified for a bit of extra resistance, and then Boundless Vitality for the extra health. So those are options I take. Now, one that I would recommend potentially taking is Celerity. This is just nice for a bit of extra movement speed, but generally speaking, this is what I will use on this. But yeah, guys, that is the video, and thank you so much for watching. Feel free to drop a like, comment, and subscribe. Any of those are massively appreciated, and I will see you in the next video.